The massive throne room stretched for what seemed like miles, its obsidian walls reflecting the light from thousands of floating orbs that hovered near the vaulted ceiling. At the far end, upon a throne carved from a single meteorite, sat Zarthax the Devourer, the Dragon Emperor of the Crimson Nebula. His scales shimmered between deep purple and blood red, each one the size of a warrior's shield. His eyes, ancient beyond measure, burned with the intensity of dying stars. For 3,000 years, Zarthax had ruled this sector of space with absolute authority. His empire spanned 17 star systems, and his name was whispered in terror across 100 more. The Dragon Emperor was not merely powerful, he was power incarnate, a being who had transcended the limitations of a species through technology and dark sciences that other races could barely comprehend. The latest group of visitors stood before him now, trembling despite their advanced combat suits. They were Korthians, a proud warrior race known for their forearms and their mastery of plasma weaponry. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Grix, stepped forward and performed the ritual bow that protocol demanded. Mighty Zarthax, Grix began, his voice steady despite the fear that radiated from his companions. We come seeking passage through your territory. Our homeworld suffers from a plague, and we must reach the medical stations in the Aurelius system. The Dragon Emperor's massive head tilted slightly, a movement that caused the very air to vibrate. When he spoke, his voice was like the rumbling of tectonic plates grinding against each other. Another delegation, another request. Tell me, Korthian, what makes you different from the last 17 groups who stood where you stand now? Grix's four hands tightened on the ceremonial spear he carried. We offer tribute, Great One. Our finest weapons, our most advanced shield technology, and tribute. Zarthax's laughter was a sound that made the floating orbs flicker and dim. Do you see those stains on my floor, Korthian? That darker shade of obsidian near your feet. The delegation looked down, and several members stepped back in horror as they realized what they were seeing. The floor wasn't just polished stone. It was stone mixed with the crystallized remains of countless beings. That was the last group that offered me tribute, Zarthax continued. They brought me ships. The group before them brought me technology. The group before them brought me slaves. All of them thought they could buy their way through my domain. The Emperor rose from his throne, and his true size became apparent. He stood 40 meters tall, his wings capable of creating hurricane-force winds with a single beat. I am not a tollkeeper, accepting coins for passage. I am the Dragon Emperor, and I take what I want when I want it. Grix, to his credit, did not run. Then, what would you have us do, Great One? Our people are dying. Your people's suffering is not my concern, Zarthax said, descending the steps of his throne. Each footfall shook the entire chamber. But your presence here is... You see, I have a simple policy for visitors. I give them one chance to entertain me. Fail, and you become part of my collection. He gestured to the walls, where the delegation now noticed countless preserved forms of various species, frozen in their final moments of terror. How do we entertain you? One of the younger Korthians asked, his voice cracking. That's for you to figure out, Zarthax said. You have 60 seconds. Starting now. The Korthians huddled together, whispering frantically. Some suggested combat demonstrations. Others proposed technological marvels they could display. Grix knew none of it would work. He had studied the histories, read the reports of the few survivors who had escaped the Dragon Emperor's throne room. Those who tried to fight were crushed instantly. Those who tried to impress with technology were found lacking. Those who begged were consumed even faster. As the seconds ticked by, Grix made a decision. He stepped forward, throwing down his ceremonial spear. We cannot entertain one such as you, Zarthax. We are mortal beings facing a god. We accept our fate. Oh, the Dragon Emperor's eyes narrowed. Acceptance? How refreshingly honest. But honesty alone won't save you. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Zarthax moved with speed that defied his massive size. His claws, each longer than a Korthian was tall, swept through the delegation. His jaws, capable of biting through starship hulls, snapped shut with devastating precision. His tail, tipped with a blade-like appendage that could slice through dimensions themselves, completed the massacre. When the violence ended, Grix was still alive, held in one of Zarthax's claws. The veteran warrior didn't struggle. He knew it was pointless. "You interest me slightly more than your companions," the Dragon Emperor said. "Tell me, why didn't you run? Where would I run to?" Grix replied, "This is your domain. Running would only delay the inevitable and rob me of dignity in my final moments." "Dignity," Zarthax mused. "Such a quaint concept. Very well, you may keep your dignity as you join my collection." The end came swiftly for Grix. The Dragon Emperor consumed him in a single bite, then settled back onto his throne. With a wave of his claw, cleaning drones emerged from hidden panels to remove the remains of the delegation. Within minutes, it was as if they had never existed at all. This was the way of things in the Dragon Emperor's court. Delegation after delegation came seeking passage, alliance, or mercy. None found what they sought. Zarthax's hunger was not just physical, but psychological. He fed on fear, on the moment when hope turned to despair in his victim's eyes. It had been this way for millennia, and he saw no reason for it to change. The next delegation arrived 3 days later. They were Etherians, beings of pure energy wrapped in containment suits. They spoke of trade agreements and mutual benefits. Zarthax listened to their entire presentation, asked several pointed questions about their technology, and then drained their energy forms one by one, adding their essence to his own power. A week after that came the mechanoids of Gear Station, artificial beings who claimed they could not feel fear and therefore would make poor prey. Zarthax took this as a challenge, slowly dismantling them piece by piece until he found their consciousness cores and proved that even machines could experience terror when properly motivated. The slaughter continued. The crystal harmonics, who tried to soothe him with their reality-warping songs, were shattered and ground to dust. The void dancers, who attempted to escape through dimensional rifts, were caught between realities and torn apart. The living ships of the Nautilus Coalition, the psionic councils of Mentera, the warrior poets of Xerxes Prime, all met the same fate. Word spread throughout the galaxy. The Dragon Emperor's territory became known as the Crimson Zone, not just for the color of the nebula, but for the blood that had been spilled there. Some civilizations tried to find alternative routes, adding years or even decades to their journeys to avoid Zarthax's domain. Others, driven by desperation or hubris, continued to try their luck. Zarthax's collection grew. His throne room became a museum of extinction, a testament to the folly of those who thought they could bargain with absolute power. He categorized his victims, arranging them by species, by the quality of their fear, by the creativity of their attempts to survive. It was a hobby that helped pass the centuries. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between slaughters, Zarthax would walk among his trophies and remember. This one had tried to poison him with nanobots hidden in tribute gifts. That one had attempted to collapse the local space-time continuum rather than face death. Another had sent their children forward, hoping to appeal to mercy that didn't exist. Each memory was a delicacy to be savored. The Dragon Emperor's servants, a race of beings bred specifically for absolute loyalty and modified to find joy only in serving him, maintained the throne room with religious devotion. They polished the floors where blood had been spilled, carefully preserved new additions to the collection, and ensured that everything was perfect for the next delegation's arrival. There were rumors, of course. Whispers that somewhere in the galaxy, someone was developing a weapon that could kill even Zarthax. Stories of ancient prophecies that spoke of the Dragon Emperor's downfall. Tales of survivors who had escaped his wrath and were gathering allies for revenge. Zarthax heard these rumors and laughed. Let them come. Let them all come. He had faced extinction-level threats before and added them to his collection. His power was not merely physical or technological, but conceptual. He had long ago transcended the limitations of biology, merging with technologies that made him as much a force of nature as a living being. His consciousness could split across multiple dimensions. His essence could survive the death of his physical form, and his will could reshape reality in his immediate vicinity. He was, for all practical purposes, immortal and invincible. Yet immortality brought its own challenges. Boredom was a constant enemy, one that could not be slain with claws or consumed with teeth. This was why Zarthax maintained his cruel game with visitors. Each new delegation was a brief distraction from the endless passage of time, a momentary spark of interest in an existence that had seen too much. He had tried other entertainments over the millennia. He had conquered worlds, only to grow tired of ruling them. He had pursued knowledge, learning the deepest secrets of a universe, only to find that understanding everything made existence feel empty. He had even tried creating life, fashioning new species from raw genetic material, but playing God quickly lost its appeal when one already possessed godlike power. No, the delegations were his most reliable source of amusement. The variety of species in the galaxy ensured that no two encounters were exactly alike. Some came with pride, others with humility. Some tried to fight, others tried to flee. Some offered everything they had, others offered nothing but defiance. Each reaction was a note in a symphony of suffering that Zarthax conducted with cruel precision. His favorite moments were when visitors thought they had found a loophole, some clever way to survive their encounter. The expressions on their faces when they realized their cleverness meant nothing. That was a delicacy beyond description. Hope turning to despair, confidence crumbling to terror, defiance melting into acceptance. These transitions were the finest wines in Zarthax's vast cellar of experiences. The throne room's atmosphere was carefully maintained to enhance these moments. The lighting could shift to cast ominous shadows or blazing brightness. The temperature could drop to near absolute zero or rise to stellar levels. Gravity could be manipulated to crush visitors to the floor or leave them floating helplessly. Every element was under Zarthax's control, part of the grand theater of death he had perfected over 3 millennia. As another day cycle ended in the Crimson Nebula, Zarthax settled onto his throne and reviewed his recent acquisitions. The Corthians had been disappointing, too resigned to their fate. The Etherians had provided a moment of interest with their energy forms, but it was fleeting. He needed something new, something different. The universe was vast. Surely it could provide him with a novel experience. Little did the Dragon Emperor know that his wish was about to be granted in the most unexpected way possible. Change was coming to the Crimson Nebula, carried not by armies or advanced weapons, but by a single small ship bearing an even smaller crew. The humans were approaching, and with them would come an encounter that would challenge everything Zarthax thought he knew about power, fear, and the nature of strength itself. The human ship looked like scrap metal held together by determination and duct tape. It limped into the Crimson Nebula's outer boundaries, its engines sputtering, its hull scarred by countless micrometeorite impacts. Compared to the sleek vessels that usually approached Zarthax's domain, it was almost insulting in its inadequacy. The Dragon Emperor's sensors detected the ship long before it reached the designated arrival coordinates. He studied the readings with mild interest. Humans. He had heard of them, of course. A relatively young species that had somehow managed to survive their own self-destructive tendencies long enough to achieve faster-than-light travel. They were known for being adaptable, numerous, and surprisingly difficult to permanently eradicate from any ecosystem they inhabited. Like cockroaches with opposable thumbs, as one of his servants had described them. This would be his first human delegation. Zarthax felt a slight stirring of anticipation. Perhaps they would provide a few moments of novel entertainment before joining his collection. The ship docked at the designated platform, and Zarthax's servants prepared the throne room for another performance. The lights dimmed to their most intimidating setting. The temperature dropped just enough to make breathing visible. The preserved victims on the walls were illuminated to ensure they couldn't be missed. Everything was perfect. The airlock cycled, and outstepped a single human. Zarthax's eyes narrowed. One? They sent one representative? The insult was almost refreshing in its boldness. The human was male, middle-aged by their species standards, with graying hair and a slight paunch around his middle. He wore no armor, carried no weapons, bore no gifts. His clothing was simple, worn jeans, a faded t-shirt with writing Zarthax couldn't quite make out, and boots that had seen better decades. He walked into the throne room like he was strolling into a convenience store, hands in his pockets, looking around with casual interest. "Oh boy," the human said, whistling low. "This is some setup you got here. Very dramatic. I like the floating lights. Nice touch. Though between you and me, it must be a pain to change the bulbs when they burn out, am I right?" Zarthax sat in silence, momentarily thrown off by the human's demeanor. In 3,000 years, no one had ever commented on his interior decorating choices. The human continued walking forward, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he was approaching a being who could end his existence with a thought. He stopped at the traditional point where delegations were meant to kneel and perform the ritual greeting. Instead, he just nodded like he was acknowledging a neighbor across a fence. "Name's Joe," he said. "Joe Martinez, from Earth. Well, originally from Earth. Been living on Colony Station 7 for about 15 years now. You must be Zarthax. Gotta say, you're even bigger in person. The holograms don't do you justice." The Dragon Emperor found his voice, though it took effort to maintain its usual terrifying rumble. "You stand before the Dragon Emperor of the Crimson Nebula, human. You will show proper respect, or oh, sure, Joe interrupted, which was another first. No one interrupted Zarthax. "Respect. Got it. Very respectful here. So, listen, I know you've got a whole thing going on. The whole will entertain me or die bit. Very classic. But here's the thing, I'm not really here for that." Zarthax's claws gripped his throne. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. "You're not here for that. Do you understand where you are, human? Do you comprehend what I am?" Joe nodded amiably. "Oh yeah, totally. You're like, what, 3,000 years old? Dragon species, probably from the Vanator system originally before you went all transcendent. You've merged with some pretty impressive tech, got yourself a nice little empire here, and you spend your time turning visitors into wall decorations. I did my homework, and yet you came anyway. Alone, unarmed, without tribute." Zarthax leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows that swallowed the human whole. "Are you eager to die, Joe Martinez?" "Not particularly," Joe said, pulling his hands out of his pockets. He was holding what appeared to be a sandwich wrapped in plastic. "Actually, I'm here about your leftovers." For the first time in 7 centuries, Zarthax was struck completely speechless. Joe unwrapped his sandwich and took a bite, continuing to talk with his mouth full. "See, I run a small salvage operation. Nothing fancy, just me and a couple of buddies. We heard about your whole setup here, how you're always, dealing with delegations. And I got to thinking, you're this big, powerful dragon guy. You probably don't eat everything, right? Like, maybe you just bite the good parts and leave the rest." The Dragon Emperor's mind, capable of processing information across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, struggled to comprehend what was happening. "You came here to ask for my scraps?" "Well, yeah," Joe said, taking another bite of his sandwich. "Look, I'm not going to lie to you. Times are tough in the salvage business. The Galactic Council's got all these new regulations about where we can operate. The pirate guilds are charging protection fees that are just ridiculous, and don't even get me started on the price of fuel these days. But biological remains from exotic species? That stuff's worth a fortune to the right buyers. You want to sell the remains of my victims?" Zarthax's voice had lost its careful modulation, rising in pitch with sheer incredulity. "Only if you're not using them," Joe clarified quickly. "I'm not trying to steal or nothing. This would be a business arrangement. You do your thing, I come in after and clean up what you don't want. Win-win, The servants lining the walls exchanged glances, something they had never done before. The very air in the throne room seemed to hold its breath. Zarthax stood slowly, his full height casting the entire room into deeper shadow. "Do you have any idea how many beings have stood where you stand, begging for their lives?" "Probably a lot," Joe acknowledged, finishing his sandwich and carefully folding the plastic wrap to put back in his pocket. "But I'm not begging for my life. I'm offering a service. Think about it. You must go through what couple delegations a week? That's a lot of cleanup for your guys here. I'll bet they've got better things to do than constantly mopping up. One of the servants made a small noise that might have been agreement before catching himself. Plus, Joe continued, warming to his pitch, I'm very discreet. No questions asked about where the materials come from. I've got connections with research facilities, exotic cuisine restaurants, collectors of rare biological specimens. You'd be surprised what a Corthian carapace goes for on the black market. And don't even get me started on Etherian energy residue that stuffs like gold for certain tech applications. Zarthax took a step forward, the floor cracking under his weight. You dare to stand before me and discuss market prices? I mean, only if you're interested, Joe said. If not, no big deal. I'll just head out. But I figure it couldn't hurt to ask, you know? Worst you can say is no. Well, I guess worst you can do is eat me, but that seems like a waste of a good business opportunity. A waste, Zarthax repeated. You think your death would be a waste? From a business perspective, yeah, Joe said. I mean, I'm stringy, probably don't taste great. I've been living on station food for over a decade. Plus, humans aren't worth much on the exotic remains market. Too common. You get maybe 50 credits for my whole body, and that's if you found a buyer who wasn't picky. Now, a crystalline being? Those guys shatter into components worth thousands each. Very valuable for certain manufacturing processes. The Dragon Emperor sat back down on his throne, not because he was relaxed, but because he needed a moment to process this unprecedented situation. In 3 millennia, he had been threatened, challenged, worshipped, feared, hated, and respected. He had never been propositioned by a small businessman. You said you did your homework, Zarthax said finally. Then, you know what happens to those who fail to entertain me. Right? The entertainment thing, Joe said, scratching his head. See, that's where I figured I had an advantage. Everyone else comes here trying to entertain you with the same old stuff, showing off their strength, their technology, their culture. But you've seen it all, haven't you? After 3,000 years, I'll bet you've seen every type of song, dance, combat demonstration, and technological marvel the galaxy has to offer. Your point. My point is, when was the last time someone tried to entertain you with a solid business proposal? Joe pulled out a small, beaten-up datapad. I've got spreadsheets, profit projections, market analysis. I've identified 17 different species remains that are currently trending up in value. Did you know that Void Dancer essence is being used in some cutting-edge propulsion research? The price has tripled in the last solar cycle. Zarthax stared at the human, who was now scrolling through what appeared to be actual spreadsheets on his datapad. Around them, the carefully crafted atmosphere of terror and doom seemed to waver, unable to maintain itself in the face of such mundane concerns. You're serious, the Dragon Emperor said. It wasn't a question. Completely serious, Joe confirmed. Look, I get it. You're the big, scary Dragon Emperor. You've got a reputation to maintain. I'm not asking you to change what you do. I'm just saying, after you do it, maybe let me come in with my crew and clean up. We'll be in and out quick, very professional. You won't even know we're there. And what makes you think I would need or want your credits? Joe looked up from his datapad. Oh, I wasn't thinking of paying you in credits. I figure someone like you is beyond money. I was thinking more of a barter system. Information, maybe? My salvage work takes me all over the galaxy. I hear things, see things, stuff that might not make it into the official channels. Could be useful for someone in your position. For the first time, Zarthax felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Curiosity without the immediate promise of violence. Information, he mused. And what information could a human salvager possibly possess that would interest me? Joe's expression turned slightly more serious. Well, for starters, I know about the 3 fleets massing just outside your territory. Different species, but they've been talking, coordinating, probably planning something big. I've seen the supply runs, the secret meetings on neutral stations. They think they're being subtle, but when you're hauling salvage through those areas, you notice things. The Dragon Emperor's eyes sharpened. He had suspected something might be brewing, but hadn't had confirmation. His spy networks, while extensive, sometimes missed the small details that someone like a salvager might observe. Go on, Zarthax commanded. There's also that ancient weapon everyone's whispering about, Joe continued. The one supposedly designed specifically to kill dragons? Yeah, I know where they're looking for it. They're way off, by the way. They think it's in the derelict sector, but I've seen the same symbols they're tracking on a wreck in completely different coordinates. Could save you some trouble if you knew where the real threat was. The throne room fell silent except for the subtle hum of the floating lights. Zarthax considered this strange human who had walked into his domain not with weapons or pleas, but with spreadsheets and gossip. You propose an ongoing arrangement, the Dragon Emperor said slowly. You would clean up after my activities and in exchange provide intelligence. And maybe the occasional hot tip on valuable delegations heading your way, Joe added. You'd be surprised how much people talk in salvage yards. Oh, we're thinking of trying to negotiate passage through the Crimson Nebula. That sort of thing could help you prepare for the more interesting visitors. Zarthax found himself in an entirely novel position. In 3,000 years, no one had ever proposed anything that actually benefited him beyond his immediate entertainment. The human wasn't offering tribute or submission, but a practical exchange of services. This is highly irregular, the Dragon Emperor said. Best opportunities usually are, Joe replied. I have a reputation to maintain. I cannot be seen making deals with every scavenger who wanders in here. Oh, absolutely, Joe agreed quickly. Total discretion on my end. As far as anyone knows, I'm just another lucky guy who somehow didn't get eaten. No one needs to know about our arrangement. If I agreed to this, if there need to be terms, conditions. Joe's face brightened. Of course. I've actually got a standard contract template here somewhere. He started scrolling through his datapad again. No, Zarthax said firmly. My terms. First, you enter only when I summon you. Second, you touch nothing without permission. Third, if you betray my trust or reveal our arrangement, I will not simply kill you. I will hunt down everyone you have ever cared about and make their ends so spectacular that entire civilizations will speak of it in whispers for millennia to come. Sounds fair, Joe said, apparently unbothered by the threat. Oh, and I should mention, I got a great dental plan if you're interested. I know a guy who specializes in large predator teeth. Dragon enamel maintenance is his specialty. Zarthax blinked all four of his eyes in sequence, a sign of deep bewilderment. You're offering me dental care? Just putting it out there, Joe said. Those are some impressive teeth you've got. Gotta be, 5 meters long each? Must be tough to keep them sharp after all that biting through armor and stuff. The Dragon Emperor looked down at the small human standing fearlessly in his throne room, datapad in hand, apparently ready to negotiate dental benefits with a being who had slaughtered thousands. It was so absurd, so completely outside the realm of his experience, that he found himself doing something he hadn't done in over a century. He laughed. It started as a low rumble that made the floating lights dance, and grew into a sound that shook the entire station. It wasn't the cruel laughter he sometimes indulged in when watching victims realize their fate, but genuine amusement at the sheer audacity of the situation. You are either the bravest or the most foolish being I have ever encountered, Zarthax said when his laughter subsided. Probably a little of both, Joe admitted. So, do we have a deal? The Dragon Emperor considered. In 3 millennia, he had never made a deal with prey. But then, again, was this human really prey? He had walked in here without fear, not because he was resigned to death, but because he genuinely saw an opportunity for mutual benefit. It was so different from anything Zarthax had experienced that it transcended his usual categories of interaction. One trial period, Zarthax decided. The next delegation arrives in 3 days. After I process them, you may come and collect what remains. If your intelligence proves useful and your discretion absolute, we will discuss a more permanent arrangement. Joe's face split into a grin. Fantastic. You won't regret this, Mr. Zarthax. Oh, quick question. Do you prefer the remains sorted by species or by market value? I've got a whole system worked out. Surprise me, Zarthax said dryly. Will do. Joe tucked his datapad away and gave a casual salute. I'll just see myself out then. Same docking bay. My servants will escort you, Zarthax said. And human. Yeah. If you speak of this to anyone before our trial period is complete, I will demonstrate why I am called the Devourer in ways your species' limited imagination cannot conceive. Got it. Mum's the word. Joe turned to leave, then paused. Oh, one more thing. You ever considered merchandising? I survived the Dragon Emperor t-shirts. Could be a nice little side income. Just thinking out loud. Zarthax watched the human leave, escorted by servants who seemed as bewildered as their master. When the throne room doors closed, the Dragon Emperor sat in contemplative silence. In 3,000 years, he had thought he had seen every form of courage, every type of approach, every possible reaction to his presence. He had been wrong. The human had shown him something new. Not courage in the face of death, but the complete absence of the fear that gave death its meaning. Joe Martinez hadn't been brave. He had been practical. He hadn't seen the Dragon Emperor as a force of nature to be defied or appeased, but as a potential business partner. It was, Zarthax realized with something approaching wonder. The most entertained he had been in centuries. 3 days passed with unusual swiftness for the Dragon Emperor. He found himself, to his own surprise, actually anticipating something, a feeling he had not experienced in centuries. When the next delegation arrived, a group of proud Zelani warriors with their crystalline armor and sonic weapons, Zarthax paid more attention than usual to how he dispatched them. The Zelani tried to impress him with a synchronized combat demonstration. Their movements were flawless, their weapons creating harmonious death songs as they sliced through the air. 500 years ago, Zarthax might have let them finish before killing them. Today, he found himself oddly impatient. Enough, he rumbled, cutting their performance short. Your techniques are adequate, but hardly original. The Harmony Blades of Zelios performed the same routine 800 years ago. They did it better. The Zelanti captain stepped forward, his pride warring with survival instinct. Great Dragon Emperor, we have practiced for decades to perfect, and yet you bring me nothing new. Zarthax moved with his usual devastating speed. When it was over, parts of the Zelani delegation were scattered across his throne room in an artful pattern that he thought Joe might appreciate from a salvage perspective. He had made sure to leave the crystalline armor mostly intact. The human had mentioned those were valuable. 2 hours later, a small chime indicated someone at the service entrance. Zarthax's servants looked to their master in confusion. No one used the service entrance. Ever. Let him in, the Dragon Emperor commanded, settling back on his throne with an air of studied indifference. Joe Martinez entered through a side door, pushing what looked like an industrial cleaning cart. He was wearing coveralls now, with Joe Salvage and Cleanup embroidered on the back. Behind him came 2 other humans, a woman with short-cropped hair and cybernetic arms, and a younger man who looked like he might faint at any moment. "Afternoon, Mr. Z," Joe called out cheerfully. "This is my crew, Maria and Tommy. Don't worry, they've signed all the NDAs. More than their lives are worth to talk about this gig." "Mr. Z," Zarthax repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Would you prefer your dragonness? Big guy, we need to work out what I should call you during business hours." Maria elbowed Joe hard in the ribs. "What Joe means," she said quickly, "is that we're honored to be here, Dragon Emperor, and we'll work quietly and efficiently." "Much better," Zarthax approved. "Proceed." What followed was perhaps the strangest hour in the Dragon Emperor's long existence. The human salvage crew worked with practiced efficiency, but their running commentary was unlike anything that had ever occurred in his throne room. "Oh, nice clean cuts on these Zelanti," Maria observed, examining the remains with a professional eye. "Crystalline structures intact. That'll fetch good money." "Tommy, bring the stasis containers." Tommy, still looking pale, but working steadily, carefully collected pieces while Joe cataloged everything on his datapad. "Let's see. Zelani warrior class, about 7 units here. Current market price is, oh, very nice. The crystal alone will cover our fuel costs for a month." "You talk as if they were cargo," Zarthax observed. Joe looked up from his work. "Well, yeah. I mean, no disrespect to them personally. I'm sure they were great warriors with families and dreams and stuff. But they're not using these bodies anymore, and waste not, want not, you know." The Dragon Emperor found himself oddly fascinated by the human perspective. To him, the delegations were entertainment, moments of diversion in an endless existence. To the humans, they were simply resources to be efficiently processed. The armor's in beautiful condition, Maria commented, carefully removing a chest piece. Military collectors go crazy for authentic battle gear, especially with, she paused, noticing the marks from Zarthax's claws, genuine Dragon Emperor damage. That actually increases the value. Really? Zarthax leaned forward slightly. Oh, absolutely, Joe confirmed. You've got the most famous claws in the galaxy. Anything with your authentic mark on it sells for premium prices. It's like, what do humans call it, provenance? Shows it's the real deal. Tommy finally found his voice. As someone bought a piece of deck plating from in here last year. Just a small section where you'd stepped. Paid enough to buy a small moon. You're joking, the Dragon Emperor said. Nope, Joe said. There's a whole collector's market for Dragon Emperor memorabilia. Very underground, very exclusive. Rich beings who want to own a piece of the legend, but aren't stupid enough to come here themselves. Zarthax contemplated this. His existence had spawned an entire secondary economy he had known nothing about. It was somehow both insulting and flattering. As the crew worked, Joe kept up a steady stream of information as promised. So, those fleets I mentioned? The Corthians are leading the coalition. They're really upset about losing their delegation last week. The other two are the Therian Collective and something called the Free Systems Alliance. Never heard of that last one before, but they've got some serious funding. How serious? Zarthax asked. They hired the Shadow Brigade as military consultants. Those guys don't come cheap. The Dragon Emperor's tail twitched, a sign of interest. The Shadow Brigade were legendary mercenaries, known for taking on impossible tasks. If someone had hired them, it meant serious commitment. Also, Joe continued while sealing a container. Remember that ancient weapon I mentioned? I did some more digging. It's not just designed to kill dragons. It's specifically designed to kill you. Apparently, some coalition of scientists started working on it about 500 years ago. They've been passing the research down through generations. Fascinating, Zarthax said, and meant it. And where exactly is this weapon? Joe pulled out a different datapad, this one secured with multiple biometric locks. According to the salvage logs I cross-referenced, there's a derelict research station at these coordinates. He showed the screen to Zarthax. Been abandoned for about 50 years, but the power core's still active. Classic sign of automated systems protecting something important. The Dragon Emperor memorized the coordinates instantly. He would send servants to investigate, or perhaps go himself. It had been a while since he had personally hunted a threat to his existence. Very useful information, Zarthax admitted. Your trial period is proceeding well, human. Glad to hear it, Joe beamed. Oh, and I brought you something. He reached into his cart and pulled out what looked like an industrial-sized toothbrush. Latest in dragon dental care. The bristles are made from compressed stellar material. Should cut through any buildup like butter. Maria groaned. Joe, we talked about this. What? It's practical. You see those magnificent teeth? That's generations of biting through armor and bone. Gotta be some wear and tear. Zarthax looked at the offered toothbrush, then at the human holding it with complete sincerity. Once again, he found himself laughing, a sound that made his servants freeze in shock. Twice in 1 week their master had displayed genuine amusement. It was unprecedented. You continue to surprise me, Joe Martinez, the Dragon Emperor said. Very well. Leave it with my servants. I will consider its use. They finished their work efficiently, leaving the throne room cleaner than it had been in decades. As they prepared to leave, Tommy worked up the courage to ask, Dragon Emperor, why do all this? The killing. Joe and Maria both turned pale, ready to grab their colleague and run. But Zarthax merely tilted his massive head. Why does your species breathe, young human? It is what I am. I am the apex predator, the ultimate expression of power. I kill because I can, because it entertains me, because in a universe of infinite possibilities, this is the role I have chosen. But doesn't it get boring? Tommy asked, apparently past his fear and into genuine curiosity, doing the same thing for 3,000 years. For the first time in his existence, Zarthax found himself having to actually consider the question. Yes, he admitted slowly, it does. Which is why your employer's proposition intrigues me. You have introduced a variable I had not considered. What variable? Tommy asked. Commerce, the Dragon Emperor replied. For 3 millennia, I have been outside the galactic economy, needing nothing, taking what I wanted. But now I discover I am part of it anyway. My actions have created ripples, black markets, collector communities, entire industries built around the fear of me. It is interesting. Joe nodded sagely. Economics makes the galaxy go round. Speaking of which, we should probably get going. Got buyers waiting for this stuff. As I headed for the exit, Zarthax called out, human. Joe. Yeah, boss. The next delegation is scheduled for 6 days. Be here after. Wouldn't miss it, Joe said cheerfully. Oh, and if you're interested, my cousin runs a documentary service. Very discreet. Day in the life of the Dragon Emperor could be huge. Just saying. After they left, Zarthax remained on his throne, deep in thought. His servants stood motionless, unsure how to process what they had witnessed. Their master, the terror of the Crimson Nebula, had just engaged in what could only be described as friendly banter with his salvage crew. The next delegation arrived ahead of schedule, a desperate group of refugees whose planet had been consumed by their dying star. They begged for passage to resettle in a habitable system beyond Zarthax's domain. In the past, their desperation would have meant nothing to him. Fear was fear, whether born of malice or misfortune. But as he looked at them, Zarthax found himself thinking about market prices and salvage values. These beings were barely alive, already malnourished and weak. They would provide little entertainment and, according to Joe's pricing guide, even less value as salvage. You bore me, he told them. Get out of my sight. The refugees stared in shock. You're letting us go? Your fear is tedious. Your form's worthless. You would barely cover the cost of cleaning. Leave before I change my mind. They fled quickly, hardly believing their fortune. Zarthax watched them go with a strange feeling. He had just performed his first cost-benefit analysis on potential victims. The human's influence was already changing his behavior in subtle ways. When Joe arrived 3 days later for a scheduled pickup, Zarthax had eliminated a group of pirate lords who thought they could intimidate him. He brought news. Those refugees you let go, they're singing your praises across 3 systems. The Dragon Emperor showed mercy, they're saying. It's causing quite a stir. Mercy, Zarthax snorted. I simply didn't find them worth the effort. Sure, Joe said with a knowing smile. But here's the interesting part. 3 different delegations have postponed their trips here. They're waiting to see if you've really changed. Changed? The word was distasteful in Zarthax's mouth. Well, yeah, 3,000 years of consistent behavior. Then, suddenly, you let someone go? That's big news. My information network's going crazy trying to figure out what it means. Maria, who was cataloging pirate cybernetics, added, some beings are saying you're going soft. Others think it's a trap. There's even a betting pool on what you'll do next. A betting pool. Zarthax's eyes flashed dangerously. Oh yeah, Tommy chimed in, more comfortable now after several visits. Huge odds on whether you'll eat the next delegation or let them go. Even bigger odds on whether you'll actually leave your throne room for the first time in centuries. The Dragon Emperor considered this. His reputation, carefully cultivated over millennia, was changing based on one act of what they perceived as mercy. It was an unexpected development. What else are they saying? He asked. Joe consulted his datapad. Well, there's a new theory making the rounds that you're not actually a dragon, but some kind of advanced AI that's been running the same program for 3,000 years. The mercy was supposedly a glitch. Oi, Zarthax was insulted. I am flesh and blood and power incarnate. I know that, but you've been so consistent for so long that people started thinking you were more machine than being. This refugee thing? It's the first real proof in centuries that you can actually make different choices. It was a perspective Zarthax had never considered. In his pursuit of being the ultimate predator, he had become so predictable that beings questioned whether he was truly alive at all. Over the following weeks, The relationship between the Dragon Emperor and his salvage crew evolved in unexpected ways. Joe proved to be an invaluable source of information, his network of contacts throughout the galaxy providing intelligence that even Zarthax's spies couldn't match. Maria turned out to have a talent for predicting market trends, advising which types of delegations would provide the most valuable salvage. Tommy, overcoming his initial fear, became oddly chatty, sharing stories of the wider galaxy that Zarthax found surprisingly engaging. The Dragon Emperor's behavior began to shift in subtle ways. He still killed most delegations, but now he did so with an eye towards salvage value. He let 2 more groups go, one because they were diseased and would contaminate his throne room, another because Joe warned him they were bait sent by the coalition forces to test his defenses. "You're becoming practical," Joe observed one day. "It's good business sense." "I'm not becoming anything," Zarthax insisted. "I'm simply optimizing." "Sure, call it whatever you want. But you know what? I think you're enjoying yourself more." "When was the last time you had regular conversations with anyone?" The Dragon Emperor couldn't remember. His servants were bred for obedience, not conversation. His victims were too terrified to offer anything but please. The humans, with their casual fearlessness and profit-driven perspectives, provided something he hadn't realized he was missing: genuine interaction. The change in routine had another unexpected effect. Zarthax found himself looking forward to the salvage crew's visits. Not just for the information they brought, but for the company itself. Joe's terrible jokes, Maria's technical observations, Tommy's wide-eyed stories. They broke up the monotony of his existence in ways that mindless slaughter never could. One day, Joe arrived with unusual news. "So, remember that ancient weapon designed to kill you? Someone activated it." Zarthax sat up straighter. "Who?" "The coalition forces. They sent a team to retrieve it about a week ago. But here's the funny thing, it doesn't work." "Explain." Joe pulled up a video on his datapad. "My contact at the station managed to grab this security footage. Look." The video showed a team of heavily armed soldiers activating what appeared to be a massive energy weapon. It powered up impressively, glowed with ominous light, then simply fizzled out. 500 years of development, Joe said, and they forgot to account for quantum decay in the power matrix. The thing's completely useless. Expensive light show, nothing more. "They must be desperate," Maria added. "That failure's going to crush morale in the coalition forces." "Which brings me to a business proposition," Joe said, his expression turning serious. "The coalition's falling apart. Different factions are blaming each other for the weapon's failure. Within a week, maybe 2, they're going to turn on each other. That means a lot of ships fighting in nearby systems. A lot of salvage. Your point. My point is, we could make a fortune if we were ready for it. But we need to preposition our ships, maybe get some protection to operate in contested space." Joe paused. "Protection from, say, the Dragon Emperor himself." Zarthax laughed, a sound his servants were almost getting used to. "You want me to protect salvagers?" "Think of it as an investment," Joe argued. "We clean up the battlefield, you get a cut of the profits plus first pick of any interesting technology we find. And your reputation gets even more confusing. The Dragon Emperor protecting salvage operations? No one would know what to make of it. It was audacious beyond belief. Yet Zarthax found himself considering it. The coalition had dared to create a weapon specifically to kill him. Even if it had failed, the insult demanded response. But instead of his usual direct annihilation, he could support the humans who had made his existence interesting again while profiting from his enemy's destruction. "I will consider it," he said finally. Tommy couldn't contain himself. "Does this mean we're, officially in business together? Should we get T-shirts made?" "T-shirts?" Zarthax questioned. "Yeah. Zarthax and Joe's Salvage Empire or something. Maybe with a picture of you looking menacing while we clean up in the background." "Absolutely not," the Dragon Emperor said firmly. "What about mugs?" Tommy suggested. "I survived the Dragon Emperor, and all I got was this coffee mug." "I will eat you myself if you continue this line of thought," Zarthax warned, but there was amusement in his tone that took the edge off the threat. As the crew finished their work and prepared to leave, Joe turned back one last time. You know, big guy, I've been thinking. Everyone's so focused on the fact that you let those refugees go, but they're missing the real change. And what would that be? You're not just a Dragon Emperor anymore. You're a Dragon Emperor with a business model. That's way scarier if you think about it. A mindless killer is one thing. A killer who understands profit margins and market forces, that's a whole different level of terrifying. After they left, Zarthax pondered the human's words. He had spent 3 millennia as a force of nature, a constant in the galactic equation of power and fear. But constants, he was learning, could become boring. Variables were much more interesting. A month later, when the coalition forces finally turned on each other as Joe had predicted, strange reports began filtering through the galaxy. Salvage ships operating under the protection of the Dragon Emperor himself, cleaning up the battlefield debris while the Great Dragon occasionally appeared to remind everyone why interfering with his new business partners was inadvisable. Some said it was the end of an era. Others claimed it was the beginning of something far worse. But in the throne room of the Crimson Nebula, Zarthax reviewed profit reports with something approaching satisfaction. He still killed delegations, still maintained his throne room of horrors, still ruled through fear. But now he also had quarterly earnings to consider and a salvage crew that treated him like a particularly dangerous business partner rather than a god. When Joe suggested they expand operations to include disaster tourism, bringing wealthy clients to view the aftermath of the Dragon Emperor's work from a safe distance, Zarthax didn't immediately refuse. He was, after all, a practical being now. 10%, the Dragon Emperor countered, and they signed waivers. Extensive waivers. Deal, Joe said happily. I'll draw up the papers. Oh, and I brought that dental floss we talked about. Industrial grade, guaranteed to handle even ancient dragon teeth. Zarthax looked at the small human who had walked into his domain with a sandwich and a business proposal, who had transformed the terror of the Crimson Nebula into something even more unsettling. A monster with a merchandising department. Joe Martinez, the Dragon Emperor, said slowly, "Do you realize what you've done? Made us both rich?" Joe suggested, "You've made me unpredictable. For 3,000 years, beings knew exactly what to expect from me. Now they have no idea what I might do. Fear of the known is powerful, but fear of the unknown? That's exponentially worse." Joe grinned. "So what you're saying is, I made you scarier?" "Considerably so." "Cool. Want to charge extra for that?" Unpredictability surcharge has a nice ring to it. The Dragon Emperor laughed, a sound that had become almost common in his throne room. He was still death incarnate, still the ultimate predator, still the nightmare that haunted 1,000 species. But now he was also something else, a creature capable of change, of surprise, of choices that defied 3 millennia of precedent. All because a human had asked for his leftovers. As Joe's crew loaded up their latest haul, chattering about market prices and profit margins, Zarthax reflected on the strange turn his existence had taken. He had thought himself above the petty concerns of lesser beings, beyond the need for companionship or novelty. The humans had proved him wrong in the most unexpected way possible. He was still the Dragon Emperor. He still ruled through fear and power. But now he also had business cards, quarterly meetings, and a dental plan. It was absurd, undignified, and completely beneath a being of his stature. It was also the most fun he'd had in centuries. When the next delegation arrived, a group of religious pilgrims who had come to beg for sacred passage, Zarthax found himself wondering what Joe would think of their salvage value. Their ceremonial robes were made from rare fibers, their prayer beads from exotic materials. "Tell me," he asked the terrified pilgrims, "have you ever considered term life insurance?" The pilgrims exchanged confused glances. "No? Pity. Joe tells me it's very important. Something about beneficiaries and estate planning." The Dragon Emperor leaned forward. "He's trying to get me to diversify my portfolio. Apparently, throne rooms full of preserved corpses aren't considered liquid assets." One of the younger pilgrims fainted. The others simply stared, unable to process a Dragon Emperor who discussed financial planning. "Now then," Zarthax continued, settling back on his throne. You have 60 seconds to entertain me. And please do try to be creative. The last group attempted interpretive dance. The resale value on their remains was disappointing. As the pilgrims scrambled to perform, Zarthax allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy had wanted him to change, had sent fleets and weapons and heroes to try to stop him. In the end, all it had taken was a middle-aged human with a sandwich and a spreadsheet. Change, he was learning, came in the most unexpected forms. The pilgrims failed to entertain him, of course, but their rare fibers fetched an excellent price on the black market, and Joe's crew managed to preserve the prayer beads intact. All in all, a profitable day in the Crimson Nebula. The Dragon Emperor had found his new entertainment, not in death alone, but in the strange intersection of death and commerce, fear and friendship, ancient power and modern business practices. It was absurd. It was undignified. It was perfect. And somewhere in the galaxy, beings whispered new stories about the Dragon Emperor. Not just tales of death and destruction, but bizarre accounts of a monster who had learned about profit margins and dental hygiene from a human salvage crew. The stories were so strange that many refused to believe them, which, as Joe pointed out during their next meeting, was excellent for business. Mystery increases value, he explained. The weirder the stories get, the more people pay for authentic Dragon Emperor merchandise. We're not calling it merchandise, Zarthax insisted. Collectibles? Fine. Collectibles. Great. Now about those t-shirts. No. Coffee mugs. No. Scale replicas? We could make a fortune on authentic Dragon Emperor scales. Zarthax considered this. He did shed occasionally. 5% commission. 15. 8. And you stop asking about t-shirts. Deal. And so the Dragon Emperor of the Crimson Nebula, terror of the galaxy, devourer of delegations, entered the merchandise business. It was the beginning of a very profitable friendship. The galaxy would never be the same.